they gave him notes telling him how the scene should go, and he I don't even know if he ever read them. I think he saw the notes and he smiled, and we were in post production, and he took the piece of paper and he turned it into a paper airplane and went to the window and threw it out the window, and we watched the notes sailing out over Shepperton Studios.
We're going to talk about working with people, right?
Well, yeah, I think we should. I mean, I think it's interesting. I thought we could talk about how different directors work, because a lot of different directors work. They don't all work the same. Everybody who comes into this process doesn't do the same thing. I've worked with many, many, many different directors, and I see their process, and I see how they, for example, I know we've talked about some of this stuff before, specifically on individual movies, but I can talk about it.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about it a little bit more generally. So, give you an example. Cameron Crowe, for example, is he, as a director, and we talked a little bit about Sidney Lumet. I noticed that has gone viral. I don't know, but it's out there talking about Sidney Lumet. Well, Cameron is somebody who, and you only learn this if you don't know him and you read his script, you were trying to budget a movie with him, you'd get nowhere. I mean, you really wouldn't understand.
What do you mean?
Well, what I mean is, if I take a script and I do a generic breakdown, I do a breakdown of the script, figure out what I think would be a normal director's take on this script, I may come up with a schedule, and the schedule is 40 days. That used to be the standard schedule for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
5-day weeks, 40 days. Anything you could make in 40 days, okay? I mean, it's come down now.
They either need 8
25
months or
days.
10 days, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, and TV movies are usually, a TV movie is 18 days, 19 days. So you figure out, those things. Well, if you're going to work with Cameron Crowe's 100 days. Now, I know that now. I didn't know that before I knew him.
Now, what
takes him 100 days, because that's what he needs to do 110 day. He needs a day a page. That's pretty much how he operates.
No matter whether it's action, big scene, small scene.
I'm just saying it's going to average out to being. He doesn't do big action. He does
1 page a day.
But he does, large.
No, I meant more like
groups.
things moving.
No.
But it doesn't.
But I'm just saying, this is the way, So if you budget him at 40 days, you're going to always be way under budget,
right?
Because he's going to take much longer to do it.
Right.
He takes a lot of time. He does a lot of takes. He also plays music constantly, all the time on the set.
Why?
So because he uses it to set the mood for the scenes that he's working in. So, I mean, he gives the actors, when after they get the script and when they're preparing, he gives them a bunch of songs, and he may give them tapes or something, and he says, listen to these songs. Listen to this song.
This is your mood
when you're thinking about this scene. Listen to this song when you're thinking about that scene. So he gives them a whole area of information beyond just the words that are on the page. That's how he works.
Now you're a creative producer and and also a director, but when you work with directors like that, do you let carte blanche, you're the creative guy, or do you guys collaborate on the vision?
Well, we still collaborate, but basically we collaborate within a structure that is created by the director, usually.
Who's the tiebreaker?
Well, the tiebreaker is the money.
Yeah, right.
The money is always the tiebreaker.
Right.
So if you don't have enough money to do the work that you're going to do, but Cameron works for major studios. He's done a couple of, since Jerry Maguire, which was an enormous hit, he had the ability to make the movies the way he wanted to make them. After Jerry Maguire, he did Almost Famous, very long schedule. Then he did Vanilla Sky. I worked on Vanilla Sky. That was a long schedule. That was a 100-day schedule, though. But
well, that's a lot. Yeah,
it's a long schedule, and I have very rarely worked on movies that have run that many days. I mean, I've worked on some big action movies like Mission Impossible 2. That was a very long schedule, but then that was in multiple locations around the
I
world.
got to ask you something about Mission Impossible, because I've heard now multiple times that Mission Impossible, definitely the last few, but apparently since basically after the first one, there's no script. It's like it's a series of stunts. Like, you think of the biggest stunts you can pull off, and then you go shoot them, and then you figure out how to tie the story together.
Well, that may be. I mean, that certainly isn't the case on the movies that I worked on. In the early Mission
Not
Impossible
Mission 2.
movies, 1 and 2, Robert Towne, was a great writer, wrote. I mean, he was only one of maybe 5, 6 writers who wrote on that. There were a lot of writers, and they would write it until to death before they'd ever put a
But you're not
scene on
aware
film.
of what I just said then.
No, no, no. I mean, I haven't seen them, but I could understand as as the series became more kind of
It's about the
molded
stunts
and done,
right, yeah.
and it is all about the stunts, and they're very important. I could see that possibly happening, but I never saw that in the case of the movies I worked on. Certainly, Mission Impossible 2 had a real script.
Yeah.
Yes, there were major stunt scenes that had to be prepared. There was a climbing scene in the mountains that had to be done, that was done in this country. There was a climbing scene, or a scene where he jumps out of a window of a high-rise building in Sydney, Australia,
Yeah.
and some of the exteriors were done there, but the actual stunt work was all done here in this country in a hangar in L.A. airport. So
Yeah.
we talked about those. But I'm just saying, everybody, directors work differently.
Yeah.
Some directors, when you work in television, you're the structure of the show is created by the producers, not the director. So the
Right.
director comes in. You can't be a Cameron Crowe type director and use music on the set if that isn't the style of the show. The show is going to be done from episode to episode. It's very rare that you can tell the difference between one episode and the 10th episode and say, "Oh, that one was directed by somebody,
Right.
and that was
Really, it's the
It's
showrunners.
not true. The
writers,
showrunners
yeah.
basically make that determination,
Yeah.
and the director comes in and helps interpret that piece of the story that amount of time. Works with the actors a little bit, but not a whole lot. The actors basically bring their characters to the day, and
They have
you
them
don't
all
rehearse.
refined after
They know what they're doing. But I'm talking about features now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
many features have been done differently. I worked with Billy Friedkin. Billy Friedkin is a director who
Go back and check
was
that
very
episode.
well
Yeah.
prepared. Very well prepared. Um,
But also a little bit of a
I mean, a
little,
diva.
little, yeah.
A diva, certainly, but knew what he wanted,
Yeah.
and ultimately had a visual style, and you learn it. I mean, if I
So,
was
so,
doing multiple
let's
movies with
compare
him,
Friedkin
yeah.
and Cameron, because Cameron Crowe versus Friedkin. Friedkin, you're saying very well prepared, so he moves quicker. What was
He would
an
move
average
quicker.
shoot?
I mean, his schedules weren't nearly as long. I mean, they were still not short. I mean, I worked on a movie with him that had probably a 60-day schedule or 55-day schedule. I mean, that was, for big movies, 55, 60 days was a good
Yeah.
heavy schedule
Yeah.
for a studio movie. 40 days for a studio movie was kind of average back in the day. And anything less than that were, you didn't see very much. I mean, when I was working as an assistant director in New York, most movies were 8 weeks, 40 days. That was a pretty standard movie. The Sidney Lumet movies were all in that amount of time, and that's what they took. I mean,
Yeah.
they took about that. With Sidney, if it was scheduled at 42 days, he'd bring it in at 41 days. He was always, he would always do a day, a better day.
Yeah.
I mean, he would manage to bring it in a little less. But when you schedule something at a certain number of days, you try to be as close to that number as you
Well,
can.
and now what maybe audience members should know, that there's also this little thing called bond insurance, where
That's true.
There's an insurance company essentially that gets hired.
Well,
to-
that is usually. I mean, if you're doing an independent movie that's independently financed, the independent financing entities that are putting the money in want to be sure that the movie's going to be finished, that you're not going to shoot 40 days and the movie needs 100 days and you're going to have 60 days of no funding. They don't want to take
They
that
have
risk.
the right to replace anybody.
They're not going to take that risk.
Yeah.
So they hire a bond company. They don't have the right to do anything. The bond company comes in, and the bond company basically gives them an insurance policy. And the insurance policy is, we will finish this movie.
I mean, the bond company has the right to
The bond
replace
company
anybody
then,
if you break.
and part of the deal with the bond company is, if this movie goes over budget, or looks like it's going to go over budget, we have the right to replace the director, bring in somebody else. All we have to do is finish the movie.
Yeah.
Now, nobody wants a bond company to make a movie because nobody is expecting them to have the creative talent to make it
Including
the
the
way
bond
you
company.
want.
They
And the
don't-
bond
they don't
company
wanna
doesn't
do it
want
either, right.
No, but
Yeah.
in the event that there's a real problem where you have a director who is crazy or is completely uncontrollable, those are decisions that have to be made. Initially, maybe they will let they will let the producing company make some suggestions about who might do that job, but ultimately they're going to make the choice.
So when you
to do
work
it.
with a director for the first time, you're really unsure, right? Like, I mean, you have to go off of anecdotal.
Almost always.
Yeah.
Almost always you go off anecdotal evidence, what you've heard, if, for example, working with Cameron, I was told beforehand, this is how he worked on the last two movies. This is what he does. It's going to take, he can't make it, he's going to work, he averages a page a day. Well, okay. Now, in television, you average 7-8 pages a day. In a standard movie, you average 3 pages, maybe 4
But
pages.
in television, you're also set up for that, right?
Yeah,
And
you-
that's
no,
the
no.
benefit too. The actors know what they're doing.
No,
so
everything
they're
you can
working,
do
but-
7 pages a day
Yeah, yeah.
on a television show.
But a movie,
It's
that's
rare
ambitious.
that you do it on a movie, but on a low budget movie you might
Yeah,
have
you
to.
will.
But the idea is that the average number of days, and of course it varies depending upon the material, but I'm talking about a standard rom-com where people
Yeah.
are talking, they're not flying rockets, they're not blowing up cities, they're just doing, that kind of stuff. You can pretty much figure out, okay, you ought to be able to get 3 to 4 pages
Yeah.
a day. That would be a nice standard amount of time.
It might be a Cameron thing that need long days, because I know my friend Jim Cameron takes a lot of takes too, and wants to cover
Well,
things from a lot of angles. And
He's a perfectionist, and his level of perfection is extremely careful. I mean, I worked on a movie with Alejandro Monteverdi, a young director who's now on his 4th or 5th movie, but he did Cabrini. He had a very detailed plan. He knew what he wanted to do. He didn't do a lot of takes, but he did his style was very little coverage and very long,
I remember
complicated
yeah.
takes.
Go back and watch the Cabrini
Yeah.
episodes. But,
You'll
but
see-
yeah,
you'll see
yeah,
what's
but
happening.
You're talking about
And,
like these setups.
I mean, sometimes the style of the movie really tells you more about the process than anything else. And I was thinking of a few movies like that. I was thinking of the television series that was on recently, Adolescence.
Mhm.
Adolescence was done by a director named I'm trying to think of his name now. I think it's Philip Barantini. That's right. Philip Barantini was the director, and he had done another feature before this that was also in a similar style,
Yeah.
where every scene is one take.
Right.
It's real.
Don't cut.
Real one take,
Yeah.
one no cut, which means the camera has to be constantly moving and put through a window
Yeah.
to get outside. I mean, everything is done in
At
one
the,
take. So everything has to be rehearsed the way theater is rehearsed.
Exactly.
The scenes have to be rehearsed, and then each episode, let's put it, an episode, a full hour episode, they do maybe 4 takes, 5 takes. So the shooting period over 4 days. I mean, they maybe only do 1 take a day,
Yeah.
but they'll do the same take the next day.
They were
Pick
talking
the
about
best
it.
take,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's it.
That's
It's done.
That's it. You're done.
You've
It's
done the whole
It's
episode.
a play.
So you've done it like a play, and you've planned it, and there can't be any mistakes, because if there are mistakes, you got to start all over again. Everything is done that way. Okay. I was thinking about the notion of, where did this all start? The notion of doing things I mean, obviously doing something in one take is great for the actors in some ways because it allows them to build up. They're not trying to remember what they did 2 weeks ago
Yeah.
in a close up and try to match it for the
It's
next
continuity,
moment.
which is rare. You shoot in
Very,
continuity.
very
Yeah.
rarely do you ever shoot in continuity in a
Yeah.
normal situation. But that's a situation where they did. They shot everything in continuity, and that was the way it was done. Now, look, there are other movies that do that are not done in one take, but they look like they're one take. And a good example, the first one that I could ever imagine hearing about was Hitchcock, who did Rope, the
Mhm.
movie Rope. It was years and years ago in the 40s, I guess. Maybe, yeah, I guess it was in the 40s, maybe 50s, I'm not sure. Farley Granger. It was done, again, very theatrically. It was done in basically one set, and the entire movie looked like it was a continuous scene. It wasn't really.
They
There
just
were
smooth
three
cuts.
cuts.
Usually when the camera
There were three cuts, and,
pans
and
or
they were done. You can't see them because of the way they were done, but there were a couple of cuts so that you actually didn't have to do the whole thing all at once. And that was the first time anybody had ever done it. When it was done, I mean, I shouldn't say the first time a modern audience has ever seen anything quite like that.
yeah.
It was done, it is kind of a trick. When it was done, it was a bit of a trick,
Yeah.
and the movie wasn't great.
Yeah.
I think the movie's okay. It's not one of the better of Hitchcock's movies, but he loved the possibility of doing
Right.
something like that. So the challenge was really,
When you
how do
think
you
about
do
the
it?
experience, then it gives people something different to go through. Because my friend also did one of the first, if not the first, full movie that way, called The Circle. They did it for HBO.
Right.
His name's Jan Fisher, and Yuri Zeltser wrote the script. But that was a oneer, the whole movie, and they were able to do it because digital cameras were getting better, and the Steadicam was able to. They had to rig up a special Steadicam with extra battery packs on the guy's back. It was a very heavy rig, but they had enough to get through, like you said, maybe 2 or 3 times in one day. Set it all up, did it, shot maybe for a week, just over and over again till they got it, and then it went to HBO again. Great movie for what it was. At the time they challenged themselves, and it does give you. I have to say if the way that was done, it feels a little bit more real. Like you're actually going through it. You're moving
Okay,
with the character.
well-
You're not looking around and bouncing around. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's
Well,
just
no,
it's different.
I think it is. I don't think you can make a statement of whether it's good or bad. Really, it depends on whether it serves the
story.
material.
Yeah.
Certain stories you couldn't possibly do that way because the time frame doesn't work that way.
Right.
A movie that was done that way, was done to look like it was done all in one take, is a movie like Birdman.
Yeah.
Birdman was done, and Birdman is Sam Mendes. I'm sorry, not Sam Mendes. It was Inarritu, the Mexican filmmaker.
Yeah.
Birdman, certainly not done in one take, but
But has that
it was done to
impression.
look like it was done in one take. It had wipes that, the camera passes something, and when it comes out on the
that
other
was
side, you have
in
another
a
shot. So
different
the cut is within the pass.
Yeah.
And he did those kinds of things. He also used visual effects to enhance the ability that it would look all of a piece, and it was extremely well done.
I think it's
really well
important
done.
also, because I think there's a lot of people. Some people might just be listening because they like movies, but for those who are trying to do things themselves, I think it goes back to another conversation we had on other podcasts about. I get asked a lot what the right camera is, or the right tool, or the right software. There is no such thing, right? It's how can, like, what serves the story, and if the story's
Well, I think Birdman was designed. The design of the shooting of it was done in concert with the writing of the screenplay. So they knew, it actually served that particular story in a way so that you could do things I mean, you wanted it to look like it was a continuous shot. You wanted it to look like when when the lead character goes through a doorway, when he gets on the other side of the doorway, it felt like the camera went with him. But actually, when the door was in front of the lens for a brief half a second, there's a cut in there, but you don't see it.
Yeah.
And then you're going into something else that was set up and done afterwards.
Not just having a great director, but also having a great cinematographer and editor who understand how this is all going to fit together. And I mean, a cinematographer can make or break a movie too. And it doesn't even have to be the whole film, but sometimes there are shots that when you go back and you dissect them, you think, how the hell did they do that? And there's a one take shot in a movie called, was it Son of Man? What's the one where there's one pregnant lady left and they have to get her somewhere? It's an older movie, Son of Man or something like that. But there is an incredible action scene that goes from the outside of a car into the car, and then they get attacked and there's a shootout, and it does kind of this panoramic view inside the car, goes around all the seats, and then comes up, and when you're watching it, you're just in the scene, but then after you're done, a guy like me is like, hold on.
They do that.
Hold on. What the fuck just happened here? Like, I have no idea.
Well, they did that in adolescence a lot, but they actually did it by literally moving a camera through a car window, handing it off to somebody else, and then the car takes off and goes someplace, and then the camera comes out of the car. I mean, it was all choreographed technically with people who were out of the shot who could be moving the camera in order to make it continuous.
So you had a couple of shots like that in Cabrini where you didn't know if that was going to really work. And when we did a movie a few years ago where just one scene, we decided, you know what, this whole scene, we'll do it as a oneer. Like it's the Steiner scene, and unfortunately, it didn't really work when we brought it into post, and we did end up kind of working it out by chopping it up and doing kind of jump cuts, and it fit the scene. We were lucky there. But do you ever, ask for just like, hey, I know you got your shot. Why don't we get it from a couple angles?
I gotta say, if you were a studio and someone came to you with that notion of doing everything in one way, you believe me, many times when I worked for a studio, they would say to me, yeah, I know it's lovely, the oneer, but get some coverage.
Yeah.
Now, the point they're saying is, if it doesn't work, you want to be able to cut around it. If you don't have any coverage, you have nothing to cut to. What are you going to do? So, but you also, that again depends on, if you have a very stubborn director who decides this is the way I'm going to do it, they don't want to have extra pieces around that some executive can later cut his movie, so you don't want that. Right. So, all of these, you look at the careers that have been shifted in that way. I mean, Orson Welles, when, after he made his first movie, which was a masterpiece, obviously, Citizen Kane, he made The Magnificent Ambersons, and it was taken away from him. And they basically forced coverage into it and reframed stuff that he would not have. So he almost disowned the movie because he said, nah, that's not the movie I made. I don't want any, but they had the power because they put up the money and they determined that was the way it was going to be. He did other movies like Touch of Evil, which has an amazing opening sequence all in one, which is phenomenal. But you could imagine a situation where the studio might have come and say, yeah, that looks beautiful, but we want to we want to break it up and see real coverage. So it's a fight that constantly exists between the director and the studio. Rarely in my case, rarely the director and the producer, because when I'm producing something, I've already got to buy into the work that the director's going to do, or I don't want to produce it. So I have to take on the director's mantle to a certain degree. And if there's money people who are complaining about it, I support the director.
I think that's
I have to explain to the people why we're doing it a certain way. That's part of what I do as a producer.
You're a good producer, because I actually know more producers and quite established ones that don't even think that way, and I commend you for that, because it's my opinion too that once you hire someone for the job, you hired them for the job.
If you didn't want their vision, you shouldn't hire them.
You should be
You don't,
surprised
but
at how many
otherwise, yeah,
people bring on a director and then micromanage the whole damn thing.
yeah.
So it's
Well,
like, why don't you just direct the
sure.
movie then?
No,
You
no,
know?
that
Yeah,
definitely happens.
yeah,
Another movie that I think of in terms of the style, how the movie style was intended as a continuous shot. It wasn't, but it certainly looked like it, and that was 1917, Sam Mendes. That was an amazing movie. They built these trenches in
yeah,
England,
yeah,
and the whole movie is done in the trenches and around, and it absolutely feels like it's all one continuous piece of work. You're watching a battle from the point of view of the soldier, and it is extraordinary. But and you had, arguably one of the best cinematographers in the world who shot it. I mean, an incredibly talented guy who was able to, who works with Sam Mendes. He works with the Coen brothers. I mean, great.
yeah.
His name is escaping me now, but one of the great cinematographers of all time. He's fantastic, and he's still out there, still making movies. That movie had to be planned and designed.
Wait, not Deakins, no.
Deakins,
Deakins?
exactly, Roger Deakins.
Yeah,
Everything about that was designed
yeah,
with Roger. So even though Roger's the cinematographer and Sam Mendes is the director, you're blurring the lines
yeah.
in a way because one can't exist without the other in this situation. I mean, another cameraman coming in isn't going to do what Roger Deakins did. Roger
No, I think, and
Deakins
that's honestly,
did
I
it.
think that's the difference between a cinematographer and a director of photography, where, and again, the definitions get blurred,
Yeah.
but the cinematographer really has a keen eye for the design before that, the color palette, the mood and all that. And the director of photography, they're executing on set usually, which may or may not have to do with the planning, because you can hire a DP to come shoot something, or you could bring in a cinematographer and have
Mm-hmm.
them help you design the mood and work with the story and come up with cool ideas for new equipment to,
Mm-hmm.
make the story better. Now, when you choose a director to work with, I know how David Lynch came about for Elephant Man. Um, Oftentimes, I've noticed that the films that you do with people, the person's previous film, it's nothing like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for instance, Cabrini. I mean, that
Yeah.
couldn't be more far from
From
the
yes.
story of Cabrini, right?
Yeah.
So, what made you think or know that a Catholic
I didn't
period
know. I
piece?
didn't know. I didn't know. And of course, mistakes sometimes get made, and you
Yeah,
wind up working on a project with somebody who, or in some situation where it's not fitting. Luckily, um, I, in almost every case that I can think of, I'm sure there have been cases where it hasn't been this way, but in almost every case where I think of, I, I tended to uh, spend enough time with the director to understand what the director
yeah.
wanted to do, and I mean, even Susan Stroman, for example, is another first-time
The
director. She did
Fatso?
the producers.
Oh, the producers. That's right.
And Bankrupt, first time feature director.
Yeah, and
That's it.
Bancroft.
I've worked
Right,
with a
right,
lot of first-time
right,
directors,
right.
as you see. When I work with Susan Stroman, Susan knows choreography, she knows design, she knows what she wants to see. She wasn't necessarily 100% sure how the process of major filmmaking worked, but she certainly knows everything about stage design. Yet this wasn't intended. I mean, and she was taking a project that had been a stage play
Right.
and
And now
turning it
it's
into a
right.
movie. So she wanted to kind of lift it up, use the tropes of movie making to enhance it without without taking it away or to making it different. So we spent a lot of time in preparation. First of
Was
all,
that you, her, and Mel together coming up
no,
with
no. I mean,
ideas,
that
or
once
no?
she was on the picture, Mel was not available most of that time. But what we would do is we'd have meetings with Susan. We did have meetings with Mel,
Right,
script meetings with Mel,
right.
usually. And that was early when we were working on the script. But when we were working on the production, how you would shoot it, Susan and I uh, watched a bunch of movies that she'd probably seen before and I had, but that were great musicals like Singing in the Rain, like
Yeah.
It's Always Fair Weather, like Bandwagon. I mean, some of these incredible, Fred Astaire,
The
Gene
MGM
Kelly
films
movies, the
from the
best,
60s.
best, best of
Yeah.
all of them. To see what they did to make them, what was great about it, and what tricks they used that were camera tricks that wouldn't be used in a theater. So Susan could get herself attenuated to all of that process. And she, of course, like a duck to water, she was immediate. She got right into it. She said, oh, I mean, there was one sequence, for example, there's a sequence in, excuse me, in Royal Wedding, famous, famous, famous sequence, where Fred Astaire is dancing in a room, and then all of a sudden he dances up the wall and on the ceiling, and it's all done in one continuous shot. The way it was done, and I worked with Stanley Donen much later, and I found out because he told
Let
me.
me take a guess. Was it a revolving set?
Yes.
Yeah.
He had a set on a gimbal.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big set, it was a small set, but it was big enough
Yeah.
so that as Fred Astaire moved to the wall
Yeah,
turned.
yeah.
So, and everything that was the chairs were bolted to the floor.
But because the
table
camera's fixed
and the
it
flowers on the
looks-
vase,
yeah.
everything was bolted so that when it was upside down, it still looked right side up. So it was an extraordinary thing. And Stanley Donen wanted to do that, designed it with his people, and they figured it out. Susan wanted to do that for a particular scene in The Producers, and we tried it. I mean, I brought in a special effects technician to design a set within a huge gimbal. I mean, a big set that would be actually on a turntable, and it just became so costly to figure it out and do that we decided not at the last minute, we decided well into the process that it was too much. It was too much. But to be honest with you, Stanley Donen did it in a music video with did the same effect in a music video with a much bigger set. Many years after he had done it in the movie. So he'd done it twice. I mean, he figured it out. But I'm just saying these are things. We sat down and we planned out how she was going to prepare. She had to learn what a script supervisor did because she didn't have one.
That's where it helps to have a guy like you who's not a hands-off producer. You've done pretty much every role, so you get to work with first-time directors and early directors because you can always step in. Where there's a lot of producers who think
I never want to do that,
and you don't, but you can take that chance because
I don't, and I'm not looking to, and of course the Directors Guild probably wouldn't let me anymore because they made it very clear that anybody from the production can't take over for a director who's fired. But the thing is, there was no intent. I mean, that wasn't the intent. The intent was, Susan came in, we would sit down. I'd have a gaffer, I'd have the cameraman, I'd have some of the key people. And everybody would fill her with information about how their role operated. So she knew what she could ask for, how she could get it. If she needed a prop, who was the person to give it to? If she needed, what was the difference between a prop and set dressing? Because you wouldn't know that. You might know it in theater. You might, the main items are sets.
You're not going to know what
you won't know what some of these things are.
Yeah, what a gaffer.
It isn't important for her to know what every aspect of everybody's job, but she has to know, she or anybody else who's directing would have to know that. And she was great at it.
Yeah.
And, but the process of working with her was all about performance, and specifically dance performance a lot. I mean, and how it was going to look on film, how wide it could be shot, how now, what could be done within a take so you don't need to break it up. Where would you want to make a cut if you were going to make a cut in a movie as opposed to seeing something from one camera position? She figured all of that out.
Was it ever on the table to take the producers into more of a death of a salesman kind of route, or was that never even a conversation?
Never a conversation. We knew right from the start that this was something. Well, of course, Mel had made many movies, so he had he knew the language of movie making. I knew the language of movie making. The only person who didn't, presumably, was the new director, who was a great director, was great with the actors, was fantastic with the dancers, just needed to round out her education to do all of the things that you did in movies. Now, the truth is, Susan, I think, is a wonderful director, and I was knocked out by the work that she did, but she hasn't done another movie.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's one of those things that she may have decided, and I don't know. This is a question we'd have to ask Susan. But she was somebody who, for one reason or another, didn't want to do another movie, or I mean, I have to would assume that was the case because she's wonderful at it, but she hasn't gone on to do any others,
Yeah.
and I don't believe it's because no one would want her to.
Right.
I'm sure she would be on a lot of people's
It's
lists.
pretty intense to
It's a
direct
different
a
it's a
film.
different process, and I think she was more comfortable
Yeah.
with the stage process than with the film
Yeah.
process ultimately.
Yeah.
Not that she was any less good at doing a
Yeah,
film. I thought
no,
she did an
that's-
amazing job. But I'm just saying these are things that you find.
And you know,
when
I
you
don't,
work
I don't
with
know if
different
people know
directors.
that originally the director and the director of photography, at least for maybe
Mm-hmm.
the first 2 years of movie making, it was about the director of photography was all things camera, and the director was really only there to work with the actors. Now
Everything.
directors have say, and
Well, it's like you
know,
couldn't make 1917
Yeah.
with a Roger Deakins and Sam Mendes without Sam Mendes understanding how
completely.
the camera operates.
exactly.
If he was just directing the actors, the larger creative, or well,
Somebody
hard
needs
to
to
say
have
the
the-
larger creative vision would have been I was going to say the director of photography. Not really true,
Right.
but I mean certainly an equal,
Yeah.
if not. A not greater amount of the work was done in concert with the two of them. So those are, and again with Inarritu and his great cinematographer Chivo, who is the same guy he uses, who designed all of the Steadicam shots and shots in Birdman. I mean, those were done that.
So when you did, okay, so Cabrini was how many shooting days?
Cabrini was about 50 shooting days, 50, maybe a couple more than that when you added in what we shot
That
in
was
Italy.
what, 180, 120 page script, or
It was about 120 page script, 115, 20 pages, yeah, which is relatively long. I mean, most comedies are usually 90 pages to 100 pages.
Yeah.
Most, I mean,
But here you were doing about
in the
3
old
pages
days,
a day,
most, but
yeah.
again, all of Scorsese's movies are, almost
3
3
hours,
hours.
yeah, yeah.
So, obviously.
Did you get through okay? Like, did you have time left at the end of the day on Cabrini, or was it all pretty
No,
much go, go,
Cabrini,
go?
we because of the way it was designed and because of how we shot it, we pretty much shot the days that we said we were going to shoot. We didn't really have, I don't remember us having a day where we didn't get the work done.
There's some
You
big
know,
scenes in there. I mean, you got stuff, a lot of extras, a lot of.
No, they were
moving
big. They were
parts,
big
yeah.
scenes, but everything was planned out
Yeah.
carefully enough. And I can't, I mean, for anybody who's listening who wants to be involved in this business, preparation is
Oh my God.
90% of it. I mean, if you prepare everything so that when you get on the set, you're not searching around for what you're going to do.
Because here's the thing:
the whole
things are
story.
going to go wrong on set, and if you've prepared, at least not everything's going to go wrong.
well-
but you're going to hit some snags and hiccups.
We were talking before about, I mentioned before Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock did Rope, of course, was the first supposedly one-take movie, which wasn't really one take, but, it felt like
Gave
that.
the impression.
But even all of his other movies, he always talked about them as being, he did all of his work in preparation.
Yeah.
So every shot was storyboarded and planned out, so he knew exactly where things were going to be.
You can tell.
He felt that the hardest part of the process was that the actual filming of it was really easy.
I was just
because
executing.
He was just executing what he'd already planned,
That's
and that's what he did.
Spielberg's way now. I mean, he basically has the whole
Yeah.
thing storyboarded, and he just, this is what we're getting.
Yeah.
Should I get some more B-roll? No, get this.
Now you have to realize, we were talking about style. We're talking about different directors. There are directors who don't work that way at all. John Cassavetes was a guy who never worked with a full script. He would have an idea of what the scene was, and he would block it out. He might have had it all written down, but there were changes that were going to be made. He would bring his actors together and he'd work with them and film them while they worked it out.
And that's
So that was a different style.
Jean-Luc Godard doesn't write scripts.
Totally different way of working.
Has Post-it notes. He puts 3 words on them. Says, "Here's your scene. Man falls in love with lady. She doesn't want him. Go."
Well, taking it the other way, think of Larry David. Larry David did a show for years. He did Curb Your Enthusiasm. He said he knew what the funny moments were, but he let his actors improvise. And he had some things written down, but no, you didn't get a whole script. You just got an idea of what the scene was, and then he had people who were real play themselves and be real, and he would somehow manage to put all that together, and it worked. So
I've heard from a number of people that it was a very fun set to be on, because there was.
Well, I imagine it would have been, but it wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be fun for the actors who are rigidly tied to the word.
And then conversely, you have notoriously Tarantino, don't change one word.
Yeah.
Those are the lines. He wrote them, and he even goes as far as to qualify actors, whether they're famous or not. It's like, I don't think you have the ability to deliver my lines. That's
never having worked with Tarantino, I don't know that, but I imagine that is.
You can hear in his dialogue.
No, but it is a style. Yeah, it is a style, and his movies all have a very distinctive style, and the words are very important. They're very quotable. They're things that are said. You don't necessarily quote movies that have been totally improvised, but you might. There may be a line. That's true, though. No,
I think you're right. I think if it's something like Curb, where it's sort of loose comedy and funny character stuff, okay. But I don't know that a movie like The Producers would be doable without a script, because you're going for like setup, punchline.
Yes.
You're going for jokes. There needs to be physical comedy with it. Those have to be timed.
Well, of course they do.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, you do in both cases, both Seinfeld, which was done very in a style that was the jokes had to be written, the lines were written, and Curb, which had a different vibe to it, and the actors were a little freer than I think.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but I actually believe that they were freer in Curb Your Enthusiasm than they were in Seinfeld, because he was using actors very often who are playing themselves, and they didn't have to do very much other than kind of figure out what to say in a normal situation. But if they weren't good at that, if they weren't good at improv, if they weren't good at being able to just come up with stuff on the fly,
that'd be tough.
They wouldn't fit in that.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
Work. They wouldn't be able to work.
So the reality is that every movie is kind of constructed in its own way, and the director, as long as the end result is good, it doesn't really matter. But I'm sure it can be scary if you go into financing and producing a film that doesn't have a script, or how do you even break something down? That's what I wonder. It's like when Godard does this thing, where he's like, I don't write scripts, and okay, well, how do you even know how many shooting days you have, or who needs to be where? Like,
he may not. He may work with smaller crews, and he may be able to put things together.
Yeah.
He obviously in his head knows how things are going to go, and so he makes sure he has the material that he needs. I think of another funny story, which I may have told already, but I'm going to say it again. Elaine May worked very much. She wrote down everything. She's a great writer, and she made a movie called Mikey and Nicky. Mikey and Nicky was with John Cassavetes, and I'm trying to think of the other actors. Peter Falk. That's right, Peter Falk.
Peter Falk. I love Peter Falk.
Peter Falk and John Cassavetes, who were good friends.
Okay.
And they used to be able. They could riff off each other, and they were very good at improvising. And she had created a lot of the dialogue. And this is. I know you're going to believe, and most of your audience will probably believe, this is an apocryphal story, and I can't say 100% that it's not, but I can tell you that I spoke to the individual who was there, who told the story, and this was the camera operator, that she had multiple cameras in one sequence because it was a night scene. They lit a courtyard, this big courtyard in New York City, and they had lights in the courtyard, so they had enough light that anywhere the actors went would be covered pretty much. So she had John Cassavetes and she had John Cassavetes and Peter Falk, and they're doing a scene and they're wandering around this courtyard talking to each other, and it's a long dialogue scene and heavily improvised because she wanted it that way. And Lou Barley is one of the three camera operators. So they turn the three cameras on and let these guys go. And the guys are going and going and going. They're talking. At a certain point, they walk out of the courtyard and around the corner. And Lou Barley, who's one of the operators, just turns his camera off. And Elaine goes over and says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he says, "Elaine, they left the set. They walked out. There's no light out there. Can't see them." He said, "But they might come back."
Yeah.
And that's the joke. The joke is, if you're improvising it, maybe they will come back. Who the hell knows? You know.
Hey, and maybe you're left with a really nice negative space scene where.
I mean, it was great. Well,
You know.
here's the other side of that story. Elaine May on Mikey and Nicky shot 1,400,000 feet of film. Now, a normal film is 11,000 feet, about 11,000 feet of film. 1,400,000 feet of film. On a normal movie, you might shoot 150,000 feet.
How can they afford that?
200,000 feet. She shot 1,400,000 feet. And it was crazy. She didn't get fired. It was a major studio picture. Look, I mean, as expensive as it was to shoot all of that footage, the bigger thing was who's going to watch it all.
Yeah.
I mean, no editor probably ever saw all the footage that they shot.
I doubt it was supervisor.
You know, up to that point, I don't think there was a movie ever shot that shot more footage than that.
It comes down also like the script supervisor who's tracking continuity. That's got to be a nightmare. I mean, I never thought of it from the scriptie's perspective my gosh,
you can't.
No way.
No, you can't. I mean, in those circumstances, it's a different job.
I mean, they're not
You're
even
just trying
saying
to
the same
catalog
thing.
who the actors are and what they're wearing.
Yeah.
And the rest of it,
It's like, hey.
let it go. I can't tell you what line he said what on, or
Right.
that you're going to have
Just
to
say
watch
print
it.
when you see something you
Yeah.
like, and I'll check it.
But I mean, so the point I'm trying to make is that there are many, many, many different kinds of ways to do it, and a lot of people do it differently.
What was Randall like? Randall Kleiser.
Randall was great. Randall was very organized. Randall is a guy who himself is able to he doesn't need a storyboard artist. He can do his own storyboards because he's very good at drawing.
Yeah.
And he would only storyboard sequences that were complicated visually, that he wanted to make sure they were done in a certain way. The rest of his movies, or at least the movie I worked on with him, was conventionally styled. I mean, but Randall is definitely somebody who knows what he wants. So he would always take advantage of a moment or something that happened, and he'd be happy to find that. But he always had a plan, always, so that there was a backup plan, just so that we had something at the end of every working scene. We knew we had a piece of the scene, and maybe we would try a couple of different things afterwards, but we still had, and he I mean, in that respect, I think now, Randall definitely is a well-prepared director. He's somebody who goes in, he knows his locations, he has thought about it heavily. He doesn't just come to it on the day and figure it out at the last minute. As I said, there are directors who do.
Who was the most which director, and I think I know who just from our talks, but which director that you worked with had you on edge the most throughout the production?
That's an interesting thought. I mean, I don't know. On edge is an interesting thing because, I mean, I've had directors, I've worked with directors who were difficult for one reason or another. didn't necessarily have me on edge all the time, but I mean, I've had actors have had me on edge
Okay.
because I didn't think that they would deliver, or I didn't think that they would bring their A game, or whatever it was, and it upset me, because I wanted to see more out of them. But
But
I don't
Friedkin
know.
demolishing the wrong building
No,
didn't
I
have you
mean,
on edge.
no. Well, that was rather late in the movie,
Right,
and,
sure,
and,
sure.
and the
But
thing
throughout he was
is,
okay.
I mean, I enjoyed the fact, again,
Or,
very
or
well.
let's let
Friedkin was a very well prepared director, and anybody who's worked with him will tell you that he knew
right.
what he wanted,
Little too
and
much.
he didn't always get it.
Right.
And when he didn't get it, he would get frustrated, and he'd have to figure out another way. But it wasn't as if I'm always better with somebody who has a plan, who
Yeah.
knows what they want, than somebody who comes out there and really doesn't have an idea and gets
Yeah.
stuck.
I guess maybe on edge is the wrong question, but was there somebody that you remember that you had to kind of just, be behind them in their wake and keep things cleaned up all the
Well,
time, or you're constantly,
I mean,
dealing with stuff?
I don't know. As I said, every movie's different.
Yeah.
I did Francis with a wonderful director, friend of mine named Graham Clifford, but Graham had been an editor, film editor. We talked about him too
Yeah.
when we talked about Francis. But Graham was, 100% on the material every second, all the time. I mean, he was the one, and I mentioned that he'd call me at 3 in the morning to give me a line reading. I said, "Please, Randall, I mean, not Randall, excuse
Yeah,
me,
right, right.
please, Graham, I'm trying to sleep. Call me in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean, but he was constantly thinking about every moment, and um, and my initial feeling about him as a director was completely wrong in a way, because I had assumed, because he had been a film editor, and he'd been a film editor of many, many great filmmakers,
He would
really,
know
really top filmmakers.
what he needs.
He would
Yeah.
have everything. He would shoot just the minimum that he needed, because he'd know exactly what it was. And as it turned out, he shot
Opposite.
more than he shot tons of material. He didn't shoot anything like millions of feet of film, but I mean, it wasn't so much that he shot a lot of film on any individual take. It's just that he wanted more angles. He wanted
Flexibility in post.
more flexibility, more ways to look at a scene, to figure out the best. And again, he had a style that is evident in the film when you see it, because some of his camera choices and some of the framing choices were very specifically made so that it could be edited a certain way. So he did have that, and it was, it's interesting. I mean, we had certain sequences that were seen from the point of view of the character that Jessica Lange was playing, and so the character would be offset a little bit in the frame, and it would be jarring, but it was supposed to be jarring because it was coming from her point of view. It was the way she was looking at him, the way, and I think that was an effective idea that worked. He could have shot it in a much more conventional way and just had a typical close-up, and the scene still
he
would have
wanted it to
worked.
seem a
But
little
this
off.
gave it a little something a little off, and you didn't know
Yeah.
exactly what something was going on in her mind.
Was there ever a director you worked with who just kind of was like, don't need to prepare. I'll figure it out. Just kind of show up and just work with actors, play
Only,
around.
only, I would say, only when I was an AD doing episodic television. Sure,
Yeah.
you had people who came in who really were just doing it for a paycheck.
Do you think most directors who you
Most
work with are
directors,
very prepared?
any
and
director
they
I've ever
have
worked on
vision?
a feature with, either had a vision or were brought in because they were chosen for a vision that they, or a
Yeah.
style that they already had. I mean, David Lynch was one of the great ones, because David had, and it was so early in his career, yet he had a personal style which kind of bled into the process of the way he worked. He was extremely efficient. He knew what he wanted. Not everybody knew what he was going for. It took him a while to figure out. I had a little better understanding because I knew him a little better than most of the crew because I'd spent months with him before we started shooting, whereas most of the crew had only just met him
Yeah.
days before. So his eccentricities seemed more severe to people who didn't know him than to people who did. But I knew he was, he knew what he wanted. He was a very, and I would say about David, even from the Twin Peaks days, David was extremely economical as a director. He knew what he wanted, and he knew when he got it.
Is that why he would get? Because nobody ever says David Lynch is an asshole. I've never heard anybody say that, but
He's not.
definitely he
Never
gets
was.
offended and frustrated when people talk about cutting scenes or shortening days because he is efficient and stuff and he knows what he wants. But there's this kind of semi-viral scene of him kind of smoking, directing a movie. I don't know what it is, but then the producer comes on and it's like, "Hey, what do you think if we got to tighten up the schedule a little bit?" And he just kind of goes off and is like, "That's just terrible. You can't shoot a movie like this." Did you ever, deal with
With
things
David,
like that?
no,
Yeah.
the only time I ever dealt with anything quite like that was when he got notes, bad notes. I mean, David was, I mean, he had a very strong sense of who he was early in his career, and it continued all the way through his career. So that the fact that he was the leader of the set later on, in his later career, and when he made Mulholland Drive and other movies, and everybody respected that, is fine. But he was that way. He was that way early on, and so even on Elephant Man, and I've told this story in another podcast, but we received notes from one of our funders, not Mel, of course. Mel, he respected Mel tremendously, and if Mel gave us notes, he listened very carefully, and because Mel was a filmmaker,
Yeah.
and he respected a filmmaker. But the other individuals who were giving us notes were bean counters,
Right.
essentially to him, and they gave him notes telling him how the scene should go, and he. I don't even know if he ever read them. I think he saw the notes and he smiled, and we were in post production, and he took the piece of paper and he turned it into a paper airplane and went to the window and threw it out the window, and we watched the notes sailing out over Shepperton Studios, and I said, okay, that's David. I mean, if I was a different producer, I might have said, oh, David, you can't do that. These are, but I knew he was gonna, I knew what he was going for, and I also knew that I wasn't going to repeat it to anybody else. I was going to offend these guys and let them know that that's how he responded to their notes. But on the other hand, that's how he responded. So
Fair,
he knew what he wanted, and he knew what he was going for. He respected people who had a reason to be respected. If his editor told him something, he would listen.
Right.
He may not want to do it, but he
But
certainly
there's
understood they had
professional experience
if
behind
Freddie
it.
Francis
Yeah.
told him something, he listened to Freddie because Freddie was somebody he respected greatly. But if you hadn't earned his respect in the film world, why should he?
But I
Why should he
appreciate
respect
that.
you?
I mean, it's like I don't go to a dentist and tell him which tool to use on
exactly
on
right.
my teeth. So
Yeah.
you hired Lynch. He's the director. He brought you all the way to the Oscars.
No, he
So,
was
yeah.
he certainly did, and
Yeah.
and he brought himself there.
Yeah.
And no, he is in his own light. He was one of the greats. I mean, he was great at his style, and I don't know anybody better than that. I mean, he was really great. I liked, as I said, Sidney Lumet was great in his style, the way he worked. He had this particular way of working, and it carried over from film to film, and I've seen it on the movies he's done. Very efficient, but always great with actors. Really, really smart. Stanley Donen had a style. I mean, all of these different people, they weren't all the same. Some were. I mean, there were certain similarities, but it is very, very important, I think, for any producer to really get to know who it is and how that individual works, whoever the person is that you're going to have direct. It's not fungible. You can say, oh, it can be this one, it can be that one. No, anybody. Once you decide you want somebody to direct, you better really take some time to figure out what the process is going to be like before you get on the floor.
Do you think, little tangent, but fun thought experiment, do you think a good director can make a bad script good, or does a bad script make a good director bad?
Whoa. I think I think a good director can make a mediocre script much better if they're smart about how they do it, and a mediocre story even better. And I think the classic example of that is somebody like Hitchcock, because the stories from which Hitchcock movies were made are not great stories, but he really lifted them up and turned them into, like Psycho. I mean,
It's an experience,
Psycho is an
really.
experience. This original story, I don't think it's a classic in writing, but it was a classic as a movie because he brought style and a take to it, and
Yeah.
everybody talks about it forever. They don't, uh, very often I think a great piece of literature is harder to turn into a movie because it exists so well in the form that it's originally been done.
Right.
Whereas if you have something that isn't so great, you can actually put all of that extra work into turning it into something special as a movie. So I don't know that. I mean, the movies that I know that have been made from great literature rarely come close
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the movies. I mean, they become illustrations of an idea rather than as good as the idea. An example of that would be Joseph Strick did Ulysses. How could anybody? I mean, yes, it has.
Yeah.
It's not a bad movie in the sense that it has each piece of it is slightly different, kind of the way James Joyce wrote it, but it is an unmakeable movie, really. I mean, you can't make the book into a script. You can turn the story of the book into a movie, but not
Not
the
the
experience
book.
of the
Right.
book,
Yeah.
because the book was an experience. It's not just a
Yeah.
story. Some things work that way, and I think it's very, very hard to figure out how you could turn them into a movie that's effective
Yeah.
and really good.
And the director will have a lot to do with that. So,
Certainly, it must.
yeah.
That's why the French always think of the director as the auteur, the author.
Yeah.
Well, yes, the director is the author of a movie if the director creates the movie. If the movie comes from a great script, is the director really the author? Maybe, maybe not.
Sounds
But the
a
auteur
little,
theory is
yeah.
another thing that we haven't talked about, but
Yeah.
obviously a lot of people have for years. And it's the notion of the director being the author of the work, and not, in some cases, it is true.
Yeah, with
Some
the
cases
script
it's
as a
not.
blueprint.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's Tarantino scripts are not blueprints. They're
No, no,
they're
I'm sure
books. Like they're
yeah,
yeah.
you
So
can
he
read
is an
them and
auteur,
love them.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, if you write your own stuff, but now like you did Elephant Man. Now that was a great script that you put a lot of work into developing. And you happen to put a great director on it. So is
Yeah, but
Lynch the auteur there,
I
or
think
is
he
it
is.
is it a
I think David is the auteur of that, because I think basically uh, he had a major hand in the writing of the script, which he
he
did,
did?
and from the original that we had, and he had total hand in the visualization of it, and so yes, I mean, in those, because it was an early movie of David Lynch, there's a notion legally that you don't ask for a David Lynch film. No one knew what a David Lynch film
Yeah,
was
yeah. There
then.
was
So
he had
there was
Eraserhead,
no
and that
credit
was
like
it.
that.
Yeah,
I mean, he got the directing credit.
yeah.
He didn't get a David Lynch film. But today, if you look at the that are still out, the DVDs now, because of who David became, now say on Elephant Man it says a David Lynch
Well,
film.
and I think that's a big difference. And a lot of these guys end up being, writer, directors, and stuff. But there is clearly a difference between that and, for instance, Vanilla Sky, which was a great
Hmm.
script and well executed, but I would argue didn't have a particular style to it in a sense of a Tarantino or a Coen Brothers
I don't
or
know.
something. I mean, it's a great film.
I could argue with you about that, but I'm not going to because I haven't really given it enough thought. But I do think, I mean, another example would be Susan Stroman did an amazing job on The Producers, but you would never put a Susan Stroman film on that movie
Right.
because it is clearly a Mel Brooks film, no matter
And
what.
it
Even
felt
though he
like
didn't
Mel-
direct
but
it,
he wrote it, right?
he
Yeah.
was, and he didn't write it by himself.
Yeah.
But initially he did. He wrote the original story. He created the music. He wrote the music.
And I think that's what it is.
He
There,
did it
there
all,
are these little seeds in there. When you watch something that Mel Brooks touched, there's the way the lines are delivered, the types of people that are in it. You know, it's very evident. And I think, you can turn on a Coen Brothers movie, a Lynch film, and yeah, you might not immediately recognize it, but if
You will.
you'll Hitchcock,
Yeah.
Orson Welles,
Yes.
Kubrick, like
Yes.
you can immediately, if you've seen any of their films, like that looks
That's
like a
what that
Kubrick
is.
film or something.
You can pretty much do it even with Sidney Lumet. I
Yeah.
mean, pretty much. I mean,
But you go watch Mission Impossible, you don't know who the director is.
not really.
There's not a
Not from
style
one
to it.
to 6 or whatever
Right.
Mission Impossible you're watching.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be.
And I think maybe that's also a little bit of the sad part with all the we were talking about the IP push last time, where everything's franchises. They're fun,
No, they are
but
fun.
they're
They are fun.
not artistic stories. I would argue that
Well, I think, one of the big things always is how you credit the material. What is it? Is it, I mean, it's a
Yeah,
big
that's
thing for
true.
directors
The genre
that
or-
want, I mean, in their first, even if their first film was amazing, can they still call it a film by? Is it a film by credit? Is that a fair credit to give? And there are a lot of people who will tell you in most films it's not a fair credit to give because it's not a film by that one person. It's a film by, but there are certain films undoubtedly that are a film by David Lynch or a film by
Werner
somebody,
Herzog or somebody.
Werner Herzog.
Yeah.
It is, there's, you couldn't have just changed the director and gotten that film. You would have gotten a completely other movie. So, and not even close to what it was.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. And then there are producers who like to bring on people who just can execute the vision. They don't want personality in it. And then there's producers who want to do what you do, or I guess more for the most part, and give somebody the ability to really do something creative and unique.
Well,
with it.
I enjoy the process of working with really, really talented people. I can't say that they're all at the same level.
Sure.
They're all different. But the most fun to be had on a project is when you're actually creating something as you go. I mean, you're creating it, and it is not just a recreation, but a creation. Now, I mean, when I say it's not a recreation, what I mean by that is it's not a masterpiece book, which is a creation that you're then you're recreating it. What you're not creating it, you're just trying to find a way to, make it visual, but not And you think about that. I think about that a lot with the stories that are done over and over and over again, the same story. A Jane Austen novel that Sense and Sensibility, or whatever it is, Jane Eyre. I mean, there may have been 5 versions of it, and I don't know. Maybe one is better than another, but are they Are they films by those directors? No, they're based on a piece of material, and pretty much they hewed to that piece of material. Right. The only difference was how good the actors were, or whether they made sense.
Now, maybe one could argue, in rare exceptions, when something like The Joker comes out, or when Nolan does Batman or something, The Dark Knight, right? That it's clearly a different Batman.
That's a good point. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. I think Nolan, because he has such a, again, he's a stylist, and he comes to everything from a new place, that he was using all of the characters from the earlier versions that were all over the place, but his version was a rather unique version, and when you look at the work he does, It's unique. It's different. It's not like everybody
It kind of
else.
took Batman into a serious space, whereas
Totally.
before it, even the the Schwarzenegger ones and stuff, they were, or they were all a little zany, and I mean,
No, they were definitely intended to have a lot
yeah,
of humor in them, and all of the jokes of the comic books and everything else. He took it out of that level and
it's like, no, it's an action
turned it
film.
into a
We're
myth.
making yeah,
Made it
yeah,
a myth as opposed to a comic book.
yeah.
Which is a
Not an
big
easy
feat.
thing to do.
That's a big
Yeah,
feat.
yeah, especially
No,
with a property like that.
I'm a big fan of Chris Nolan's. I think
Yeah,
he's one of our
a
really
smart
top
guy. Yeah.
directors now.
Speaking of gimbals, the Inception, there's a scene where they're tumbling around in a hall. They did it that way too.
Yeah.
Spinning gimbal. Well, cool.
All right.
Next time we talk about production assistants and how to choose the correct ones.
Sounds like a good plan. All right.
All
man.
right.
Thank
Thanks.
you, man. Okay.
This is a fun topic.
Yeah, it was good.